Hello, everybody. Welcome to this webinar on Ayurveda on menstruation. For those of you who don't know me yet, I am Salima Punawala. I have been teaching yoga full-time since the past 6 years. I'm also the founder of Adya Shakti, and we focus on preventive healthcare for women. Thank you very much for joining in. I hope कि आप जो ये time निकाल कर आए हैं, you're able to make the most of it. So being old school as I am, I would suggest that you keep a notepad handy. You may get a lot of questions in the course of this webinar. बहुत सारे सवाल आपको एक point सुनने के बाद शायद आ सकते हैं. So I would suggest that you note them down. हो सकता है कि webinar खत्म होने के पहले आपको उन सवालों के जवाब मिल जाएं. अगर नहीं मिले, तो we will have a round of question and answer session towards the end. Okay, so stay put and we'll get started right away. सबसे पहले I'll take you through the agenda for this webinar. Okay, so like I said, we are focused on preventive healthcare for women specifically. तो वो prevent करने के लिए हमको बहुत सारी जानकारी होना चाहिए. One of which is the Ayurvedic perspective on menstruation. So the agenda, the first item on the agenda is the role of Tridosha or Tridosh in menstruation. We will go through each of these points in detail. The other thing that we will look at is the gifts of menstruation. And the last thing that we will discuss is the recommended regime for menstruating women according to Ayurveda. These are the areas that we are going to touch upon in today's webinar. Now, what are the objectives? What are the things that we would want you to take away from this webinar? That is very important. So the first very important thing is that after this webinar, you should be able to understand the shift in your energies throughout Rutukal. Now, Rutu is one of the words in Sanskrit for menstruation. Kal is period. When we say Rutu Kal, we actually mean the entire duration. अगर आपका 28 days का menstrual cycle है या जितने भी दिन का आपका menstrual cycle है, उस पूरे period को कहा जाता है ऋतुकाल. तो उसमें हम लोग बहुत सारे physical changes, even emotional changes feel करते हैं. But उसका reason क्या है और उसको हम कैसे how we can use it to our advantage is something that we would want you to take away from here. Another very important thing is that there are scientific reasons behind the recommended regime. The word for it from Ayurveda is Rajasvala Paricharya, which we will go through in detail in today's webinar. I hope everybody is able to hear me clearly. Let's get started for the day. We'll start with this quote from Charak Sahita. Acharya Charak is one of the most revered and one of the most learned acharyas. We need to stay on the quote, yes. One of the most revered acharyas of Ayurveda. And this quote that all ills of humanity are rooted in ignorance and all progress and happiness in unclouded knowledge. We do a lot of things that may be working against us, okay? We have a unique gift of menstruation. As women, it comes with a lot of gifts. It comes with a lot of responsibility also. And by not knowing a lot of things, we may be working against our own bodies and working against nature. So we hope that through this webinar, we are able to impart some knowledge and help you connect a few dots. Okay, so on that note, let's get started. We'll get started from here, Shalu. Yeah. तो सबसे पहले we need to contextualize कि हम Ayurveda point of view से यहाँ पे बात क्यों कर रहे हैं. We are more attuned with what modern sciences have to offer. Exposure उसके बारे में ज्यादा है, बात उसके बारे में ज्यादा होती है. जब हम बीमार होते हैं तो हम usually एक एलोपैथी डॉक्टर के पास में जाते हैं and that is absolutely fine. The idea here is to understand what our ancient Indian sciences have to offer, how they vary, what are some of the ways in which they can beautifully complement modern sciences. So we look at this one by one. सबसे पहली बात ये है कि जो modern science है, that works at the level of what is known as the स्थूल शरीर, okay, the gross or the physical body. जैसे आप डॉक्टर के पास जाते हैं तो आप उनको सिम्टम्स बताते हैं कि आपको क्या हो रहा है, आपको बुखार आ रहा है, वॉमिटिंग हो रही है, लूज मोशन हो रहा है, क्या हो रहा है. वो सारे आपके फिजिकल बॉडी से रिलेटेड सिम्टम्स हैं जो आपके डॉक्टर सुनते हैं, वो एक डायग्नोसिस करते हैं, वो आपको ट्रीट करते हैं. Now, how does Ayurveda look at the whole thing? It looks at the gross body, yes. In addition to that, it also looks at what is known as the Sukshma Sharir, meaning the subtle body. Now, this we will understand a little better when we go on to the following points, and I will explain it to you with examples there. So next one. Now, modern science, if you see, is completely evidence-based. And of course, it is a very good approach to have. So unless you go to a doctor and say कि मुझे यहाँ पे दर्द हो रहा है या मुझे यहाँ पे कोई प्रॉब्लम है, and the doctor thinks कि हाँ अगर इनको लोअर बैक पेन है तो शायद इनको कैल्शियम डेफिशिएंसी हो सकती है, या अगर इनका रिसेंट में कोई ऑपरेशन हुआ है लाइक अ सी सेक्शन और रेगुलर वजाइनल बर्थ ऑल्सो, तो इनको लोअर बैक में पेन हो सकता है, बिकॉज ये होता है, ये देखा गया है, इट इज एविडेंस बेस्ड. दैट इज हाउ मॉडर्न साइंस अप्रोचेस इट. What Ayurveda looks at is known as pratyaksh praman. So it's not like Ayurveda will completely go away from evidence, but what Ayurveda will do is that if you go to a Vaidya, you have nothing to show in terms of the physical body. But if you say that, I feel uneasy while doing this or while eating this. Now, when you're feeling uneasy, maybe you don't have something like वो खाने के बाद मुझे बुखार नहीं हुआ, मुझे पेट दर्द नहीं हुआ, everything was fine, I could sleep also well, but I was feeling uneasy from within. You say this to an allopathic doctor and they will say कि कुछ हुआ ही नहीं है, तो why are you here? But when you go to an Ayurvedic Vaidya, he will ask you a series of questions till he arrives at why you were feeling uneasy, and that is known as pratyaksh praman. अब इसका कोई साइंटिफिकली नोटेड एविडेंस नहीं होगा, क्योंकि ऐसे कितने लोग होंगे जो आके बोलेंगे कि मुझे ठीक नहीं लग रहा है, हुआ कुछ भी नहीं है बट मुझे ठीक नहीं लग रहा है. दैट इज व्हाई इट इज नॉट एविडेंस बेस्ड, इट इज मोर इंडिविजुअल फीलिंग which is known as pratyaksh praman. Over to the next one. Modern science looks at the whole body as a sum of its parts, and we will go into this a little later with the other point. Ayurveda looks at the body, both Sukshma Sharir and the Sthula Sharir, and it says that the whole is inclusive of all its parts. And there is a difference. मतलब आपको words सुन के, shall we need to look at the next point? आपको words सुन के शायद इतना नहीं difference पता चलेगा, so dwell on it a little more. Okay? Modern science says that a whole body is the sum of its different parts, and Ayurveda says that whole is inclusive of all the parts. Matlab each of the parts has a role to play in how the whole feels. You cannot segregate them, which is what brings us to the next point. Agli point jo hai, modern science ke andar you will see a lot of compartmentalization, and that is why you have a specialization. आपको घुटने में दर्द है, आप ऑर्थोपेडिक के पास में जाएंगे. आपको अगर कोई हार्मोनल इशू है तो आप गायनेकोलॉजिस्ट के पास में जाएंगे. आपको लगता है कि खाने पीने का कुछ प्रॉब्लम है, आप एक न्यूट्रिशनिस्ट के पास में जाएंगे. तो ऐसे हर एक जो हमारे अलग अलग सिस्टम्स हैं, दैट इज व्हाई यू हैव डिफरेंट स्पेशलाइजेशंस. इन आयुर्वेद दैट इज नॉट द केस. What Ayurveda looks at is that there is a continuous interaction of all the parts that influences the whole. तो अगर आप एक वैद्य को जाके बोलेंगे कि मेरे पेट में दर्द है, तो ऐसा नहीं है कि आपको एक गैस्ट्रो का वैद्य अलग मिलेगा, आपको एक न्यूट्रिशनिस्ट वाला वैद्य अलग मिलेगा. ऐसा नहीं होता है, because they look at it as a whole. Okay, we'll go into this a little deeper in the webinar. Modern science emphasizes a lot on hormones, and so does Ayurveda. But how does Ayurveda look at it? It looks at how Tridosha influences our hormones. Okay, and that is what the whole big chunk of the webinar is all about, and we'll get started on that. So let's understand what Tridosha is, ताकि ये सारा आप correlate उससे कर सके. Okay, now just understand what Tridosha is first. We need to understand सबसे पहले कि ये स्थूल शरीर मतलब फिजिकल या ग्रॉस बॉडी के लेवल पर नहीं, ये सूक्ष्म शरीर या सटल बॉडी के ऊपर वाला काम करने वाली चीजें हैं. So to define it, actually English is a very poor language, so you cannot literally translate what it means, but if one has to do that, then Tridosh actually refers to subtle internal forces or energies that are operating on the sukshma or the subtle body. इसका मतलब क्या है? अब जब किसी की सर्जरी होती है, when a part is cut open, you can see the organs, na? You can see organs, you can see a lot of veins, you can see those things physically, tangibly. When somebody is operated upon, you cannot see the dosh, क्योंकि वो anatomical body नहीं है. जैसे चक्रा होते हैं, नाड़ियां होती हैं, वो anatomically visible नहीं होती हैं, because they are not at the physical level, they are at the subtle or the sukshma sharir level. Okay, so what is Tridosha? It is internal force or energy. We go into further detailing and explanation of that. It is called three because there are three dosh, and actually the word is dosh and not dosha. Okay, the word is dosh, and there are three kinds of dosh, namely Vata, Pitta and Kapha. And we'll go into each one of these in detail. But before that, let us understand that one, everybody has Tridosh. मतलब हर एक इंडिविजुअल, हर एक ह्यूमन बीइंग के अंदर ये तीनों दोष जो हैं वो प्रेजेंट होते हैं और अलग अलग कॉम्बिनेशंस में प्रेजेंट होते हैं. So most people will have two दोष जो ज्यादा एक्टिव है और एक दोष जो थोड़ा कम एक्टिव है. ये यूजुअली होता है आइडियल हेल्थ सिनेरियो में. द त्रिदोष इज परफेक्टली बैलेंस्ड, मतलब कोई भी कम नहीं होता है, कोई भी ज्यादा नहीं होता है. और इनका जो आपस में कॉम्बिनेशन होता है, द वे दे इंटरैक्ट विद ईच अदर, द वे दे फंक्शन with each other is what influences the individual's health, personality, menstruation, and the quality of menstrual blood. That is why it is not like, it is not fixed that every woman will menstruate only for X number of days. She will have the same amount of blood flow. The color of the blood will be the same. The thickness or consistency will be the same. It will vary from one person to another because the combination, the lifestyle, overall genetic, everything works together as a whole. Okay, we'll take this a little deeper later. Now, imbalance of दोष results in disease. तो जो combination होता है आपके दोष का, त्रिदोष का, उससे आपकी प्रकृति, मतलब आपका जो total body constitution है वो determine किया जाता है. If it is imbalanced, and that is why it is called दोष. दोष मतलब हम बोलते हैं ना fault है कुछ, कुछ defect है. That is why the word दोष. क्योंकि अगर वो imbalance हुआ तो फिर वो प्रकृति जो है उसमें विकृति, मतलब उसमें डिजीज उत्पन्न होगा if there is an imbalance of tridosh. Okay, one more thing that we need to understand here, when we see the graphic we'll come to understand. अब ये जो दोष हैं, we need to go to the next one, शालू. इनकी बॉडी के अंदर अपनी अपनी जगह है, मतलब जहां पे इनका ज्यादा काम होता है. दैट इज हाउ इट इज. सो इफ यू लुक एट द ग्राफिक, इट इज एक्सट्रीमली क्लियर. ओके, आपका हेड, आपका थ्रोट, पार्ट ऑफ योर चेस्ट इज वेयर द कफा दोष इज प्रिडोमिनेंट. Okay, when you look at the qualities of Kapha Dosh, and we'll come to know very easily now. Okay, Kapha Dosh जो है, अब हमारे जो सर है, हमारा जो पूरा थ्रोट का एरिया है, यहाँ पे क्या होता है? That is where the breath is from. That is where a lot of moisture also works. आपको जब सर्दी होती है ना, कफा जो है, it is more of a cooling kind of प्रकृति. ठीक है, कफा जो है वो कूलिंग वाली प्रकृति होती है और वो बिल्डिंग वाली प्रकृति. We need to stay there. वो बिल्डिंग वाली प्रकृति होती है. तो आपको जब हमको सर्दी होती है, excessive cool is what it will, when there is an imbalance, it will come to that. पित्त जो है, as you can see, the area is between the heart and the navel. So the stomach, the navel, वो जितने भी हमारे organs उस area के अंदर आते हैं, okay, वो पित्त से govern किए जाते हैं. We'll go into this detailing a little later also. Pitta is the fiery principle, and they're also a combination of the Pancha Mahabhuta or the 5 elements that we are all made of, and we'll go at that also later. Vata, as you can see, is predominant in the area below the navel. Okay, just keep this much in mind so you can connect the dots on the following slides. Now we'll look at each one of these individually, see the role that they play in our body and how we need to be attuned to that. Okay, we'll start with the first one, which is Vata, also known as the Vayu Dosh. Okay, so like I said, there is Pancha Mahabhuta, na? The 5 elements that we are all made of, that the whole Prithvi is made of. Okay, so we know that there is Agni, there is Vayu, there is Akash, there is Prithvi, and there is Jal. तो अपने पास में है सबसे पहले Vata और Vayu Dosh. Now this is made of 2 of the elements, which is air and earth. Air and sky. Air and sky is what it is made of. This is the Vata Dosh. So now let's look at the characteristics. इनका काम क्या होता है, etc. सबसे पहले the seat. Where is it? The primary seat of Vata is in the intestinal tract and the rectum. If you remember the previous graphic, तो navel के नीचे वाला जो हिस्सा है, वहां पे आपका Vata दोष जो है वो predominant होता है. अब what does it govern? It governs movement. Now start correlating these things. Vayu dosh है, it is made out of 2 primary Mahabhutas, which is air and which is sky. Now these things keep changing all the time, right? हवा जो है उसका काम रुकने का नहीं है, वो चलती रहेगी. When you look at the sky, the clouds are always moving. They're not still, they're not in statue mode. It is the principle or the energy of movement, and it also promotes creativity, flexibility, and flow. We will be able to understand this a little better in a few minutes. Okay. Now look at what this is responsible for. All these functions in the body are a function of the Vata dosh. Circulation, as in blood circulation hai, respiration hai. Remember, anything that involves movement. Okay, motor function hai, sensory hai, excretion. Excretion is also downward movement. Unnecessary things, impurities are being flushed out of the body. It is a movement. Menstruation is a movement. Lactation, birthing, giving birth, all that is a function of Vayu or Vata dosh. Okay. Now what we need to understand here from the menstruation perspective comes into the picture as soon as we look at the next thing. And that is, Shifali, we need to hit enter. Yeah. When is Vayu dosh or Vata dosh predominant in the context of menstruation? Now, जब आपका पीरियड शुरू होता है, भले वो 2 दिन रहे, वो 7 दिन रहे, वो जितने भी दिन रहे, उस टाइम पे आपका वात दोष प्रेडोमिनेंट है. व्हाट डज दिस मीन? हर किसी की, लाइक आई सेड, एक इंडिविजुअल प्रकृति है. मतलब वो त्रिदोष का कोई ना कोई कॉम्बिनेशन जो है वो आपके शरीर में ज्यादा प्रेडोमिनेंट है. लेकिन जब आपकी मेंस्ट्रुअल साइकिल शुरू होती है और जब तक वो 4 दिन 5 दिन जब भी वो खत्म होती है, उस दौरान आपका वात दोष ही प्रेडोमिनेंट होता है. अगर वो प्रेडोमिनेंट नहीं हुआ, then it is going to interfere with menstruation. It has to gain predominance because that is when it becomes like the protagonist of the show and takes the reins in its own hands. So remember that Vata dosh is predominant during your menstrual cycle, the actual duration. Now let's understand this a little better. Okay, continuing with Vata dosh. अगर विकृति हुई तो क्या होगा? अब देखिए, हमने देखा था उस ग्राफिक में कि नाभि के नीचे वाला जो पूरा हिस्सा है, that is where Vata dosh is predominant. ओके, सो आपकी जो स्मॉल इंटेस्टाइन है, अगर वहां पे वात दोष का इम्बैलेंस है, ऑब्वियसली इट विल लीड टू डाइजेस्टिव डिसऑर्डर्स बिकॉज इट इज रिस्पॉन्सिबल फॉर सर्कुलेशन एंड फॉर रेस्पिरेशन. ऑल नर्वस डिसऑर्डर्स आर अ रिजल्ट ऑफ अ विशिएटेड और एन एग्रावेटेड और अ डिस्टर्ब्ड वात दोष. Menstrual and reproductive disorders, extremely relevant to understand the role of Vata in a woman's life month on month. Now, how do you know कि मेरे body में Vata का imbalance है? First, we look at the physical signs. अगर Vata कम है या ज्यादा है, in either case there is going to be problem. Okay, there can be constipation क्योंकि digestion जो है वो impaired है. आपकी memory पे भी असर पड़ेगा because it governs the nervous function and the nervous system also. आपकी स्किन पे असर पड़ेगा. अगर बहुत ज्यादा मूवमेंट है, मॉइस्चर नहीं रहेगा, more of dryness. During your periods you can feel that your skin is different, your hair is different. That is because Vata is at work. There'll be gas and bloating, there'll be cracking of joints. You may have heard that a lot of women start complaining of knee pain, joint pain, etc. after they cross their menopausal period. That is when Vata is said to become predominant. Unless it is in balance, more of Vata will lead to these things. There will also be sensitivity to high sounds for when we are in a high or rather a more of a Vata predominant role. The other thing is the behavioral or psychological signs. Now, one thing before you read this or before you connect the dots, we need to understand is that Ayurveda does not separate the body and the mind. It understands that there is psychosomatic and somatopsychic interrelations happening at work. That is why you will not find a Ved who is a psychologist. You will find just one Ved who will look at everything. When you go and say, "Mere pet mein dard hai," the Ved will also ask you, how is your emotional state of mind, apart from understanding your pridosha. So every dosh will also give you, if there is an imbalance, it will change your behavior. Now you can understand कि जब आपके periods होते हैं तो आपके mood swings क्यों होते हैं? Why do you feel like मतलब क्या, you don't feel like you're not at your best energetically, you don't feel like setting too many goals, you may have the intention but you may still not be up for it. Now when you read, I hope that you're able to connect the dots on that. Okay, we go over to the next one from here, which is Kapha Dosh. Now, like I said, all the dosh are a combination of at least 2 of the Pancha Mahabhutas. So Kapha is water and earth. Okay, तो पृथ्वी और पानी, मॉइस्चर का जो एलिमेंट है उसको याद रखना. अब इसका, sorry, I've written Pitta there. I've written Pitta there, but this is about the primary seat of Kapha. Okay, So the stomach, not the whole intestine area, that is part of Pitta. The stomach, the breast, the throat, the head, and the joints is the primary seat of Pitta. Now just go back to what I said, कि menopause के बाद में women start complaining of joint pain etc. क्योंकि कफ कम होता जाता है और वात कई बार बढ़ता जाता है. That is a part of nature, and that also medical science will correlate with respect to the drop in estrogen levels post menopause. Now let's understand kapha a little better. Okay, what does this govern? It governs structure stability. तो बच्चों में जो है कफा दोष ज्यादा प्रेडोमिनेंट होता है. Why? Because it is the building time. एक बच्चा कितना जल्दी बढ़ता है. I don't say कि उसका वजन बढ़ता है. I'm saying that the organs are getting fully formed, the joints, the muscles, everything is taking shape. 9 months में जो gestation में होता है उससे कहीं ज्यादा rapid growth बाहर आने के बाद में होता है. Why? Because the kapha dosh का function वो है. That is why you will see that small kids are highly prone to common cold. सर्दी जुकाम उनको जल्दी होता है because it is the combination of water. The moisture level is high. Their bodies have so much more water, more than an adult would have. Okay, so building structure stability ये सब कफ के गुण है. Okay, now what is it responsible for? Easy to understand now. It is responsible, you can keep going, Shalu. So it is responsible for all these functions. It will keep the body hydrated, it will lubricate. न्यूट्रिशन क्यों? बिकॉज न्यूट्रिशन के लिए एसिमिलेशन के लिए भी पानी का होना जरूरी है. इम्यूनिटी, ऑल ऑफ दैट. नाउ व्हेन इज कफा प्रेडोमिनेंट? जस्ट एज योर मेंस्ट्रुएशन एंड्स, then ovulation has to start. The body starts preparing. The body works like like the clockwork. तो जैसे ही menstruation खत्म हुआ तो अगले साइकिल की तैयारी तब से शुरू हो जाती है. ओव्यूलेशन शुरू करना है. अब menstruation में क्या होता है? The endometrial lining is shed. जो हमारे यूट्रस का लेयर है एंडोमेट्रियम, जिसको तैयार किया जाता है फॉर कंसेप्शन. इफ प्रेगनेंसी डज नॉट अकर तो फिर उसको रेडी रखने का कोई पॉइंट नहीं है, तो वो शेड आउट किया जाता है. अब वो शेड आउट होता है तो उसको रीबिल्ड करना पड़ता है, एंड बिल्डिंग इज कफा's रोल. दैट इज व्हाई इट इज प्रेडोमिनेंट आफ्टर द मेंस्ट्रुएशन एंड्स एंड टिल ओव्यूलेशन बिगिंस एंड द एंडोमेट्रियल लाइनिंग स्टार्ट्स गेटिंग मेड अगेन. नाउ एट दिस लेवल women are at their most energetic and emotionally highly stable. If you've not done this already, then you should definitely do this. When you track your cycles, I hope you do. If you don't, then you should start. When you track your cycle from day 1, जब आपका cycle खत्म होता है, तब से लेके ovulation होने तक आपकी body में आप क्या change feel करते हैं, physically, emotionally. When you become aware of these things, you can correlate with these much better. Now let's understand kapha a little more in detail. Okay, विकृति, अगर आपके कफा दोष excessively ज्यादा predominant है तो क्या होगा? ओबेसिटी होने के बहुत ज्यादा चांसेस है. रिमेंबर कि कफा का रोल जो है वो बिल्डिंग वाला है, और बिल्डिंग के लिए हमको क्या चाहिए? बॉडी को बिल्ड करने के लिए हमको फ्यूल चाहिए. फ्यूल जो हमारे लिए खाना होता है. It can make one feel excessively hungry. It can also slow down digestion because kapha as such is a heavy dosha. It is not something which has the quality of being light. Vata is light because it is moving. Just think of air and just think of water. You cannot call air heavy, but water, you'll think of oceans and you know what we are talking about here. So that is what kapha will do. It will slow down digestion because वो पित्त को खा जाएगा. When we look at pitta, you will understand. Okay. Now, what are the signs that you need to look out for when you're looking at kapha? How do you understand the signs of imbalance? Physically, क्या होगा? Like I said, water की quality है तो persistent cold है. A lot of you feel congestion in the nose, in the throat, in the chest, etc. सुबह सुबह बहुत ज्यादा छींक आना could be an indication कि अभी आपका kapha जो है वो ज्यादा predominant चल रहा है. Respiratory distress is also another sign. Now let's look at the behavioral or psychological signs. This is what will happen when your body has an imbalance and excess of kapha. Okay, there'll be more of food cravings, there'll be laziness. Without any reason, you may just feel very sad. You may feel like crying. Okay, and that is also something that we experience sometimes, in the course of a month. Now it is easy to understand that. Which brings us to the next one, which is pitta. Pitta dosh जो है, now as you can see, is the combination of fire and water. तो अग्नि का जो रोल है, अग्नि इज प्रिडोमिनेंट, जो महाभूता में से, पंच महाभूता में से अग्नि का सबसे ज्यादा रोल है. नाउ व्हाट इज द प्राइमरी सीट ऑफ पित्ता इज वेरी इजी टू अंडरस्टैंड. डाइजेशन. नाउ अंडरस्टैंड दैट पित्ता इज द क्वालिटी ऑफ ट्रांसफॉर्मेशन. अगर आपको खाना बनाना है तो आपको गैस जलाना पड़ता है. विदाउट फायर यू कैन नॉट कुक. करेक्ट? यू कैन नॉट ट्रांसफॉर्म. You can make a sandwich without fire. Why? Because you're not essentially transforming the nature of those vegetables that you're adding to your sandwich. But if you want to transform, आपको भिंडी की सब्जी बनानी है तो बिना फायर के वो पॉसिबल नहीं है. वो काम शरीर के अंदर पित्त करता है. So the seat of pitta is liver, spleen, heart, pupils of the eye. Remember जब आपकी आंखें क्यों जलती हैं जब बुखार होता है? तो पित्त ज्यादा है. That is why you get a fever. The body is giving you an indication कि बॉडी के अंदर हीट ज्यादा है, आंखें जलती है. ओके, यू कैन फील इट ऑन द स्किन इन द फॉर्म ऑफ एक्ने, एंड ऑफ कोर्स इट विल अफेक्ट द स्मॉल इंटेस्टाइन्स बिकॉज इट प्लेज सच एन इंपॉर्टेंट रोल इन डाइजेशन. ओके, नाउ व्हाट डज दिस गवर्न? इट गवर्न्स योर बॉडी टेम्परेचर. इट ऑल्सो प्रमोट्स अंडरस्टैंडिंग एंड इंटेलिजेंस. व्हाई डज इट प्रमोट? मतलब क्या कनेक्शन है? थिंक अबाउट इट. व्हेन वी थिंक अबाउट अंडरस्टैंडिंग और इंटेलिजेंस, अब जैसे आप ये वेबिनार अटेंड कर रहे हैं, maybe you will receive some information that you were not aware of earlier. Your mind is going to process it and it is going to transform it for you. ताकि मैं जो बोल रही हूँ वो पहले आप सिर्फ सुन रहे हो अपनी फैकल्टी से, फिर आपका माइंड उसको प्रोसेस कर रहा है. So it is transforming. Hopefully it will also convert into action, when you decide to act upon some information, some knowledge you've received. That role is played by Pitta. Okay? So then what is it responsible for? Being Agni predominant, it has the property of transformation, like I said. So it is responsible for the whole process and journey of digestion, metabolism, and also ovulation. Remember that ovulation क्या होता है? It is a follicle which is already in the ovary. फिर वो बाहर आता है, फिर वो fertilize होता है तो pregnancy होती है, वो fertilize नहीं होता है तो menstruation होता है. But that follicle gets transformed into an ovum or the female egg, and then further it gets transformed. If it gets fertilized, it gets transformed into an embryo. All that happens with pitta. Okay, which is why if a woman goes to a doctor and she says that I want to conceive, the doctor will say that you have to start eating right because your digestion has to be good, your gut bacteria has to be good. Okay, so around ovulation jo hai, pitta starts gaining predominance because it has to aid the transformative process. And before menstruation, what happens? जो हम PMS symptoms जिसको बोलते हैं, पित्त is also partly responsible for that, along with Vata. Okay? तो Vata और पित्त दोनों भी हमारे PMS और menstruation के इसमें काम करते हैं. Now let's understand पित्त a little better. विकृति क्या होगी अगर आपका पित्त imbalance हुआ? तो एक तो आपको indigestion और उससे related जितने भी gastric troubles हैं वो हो सकते हैं. They can be inflammation. हम जो बोलते हैं पेट में ठीक नहीं लग रहा है, I feel like बहुत गर्म लग रहा है अंदर, और you feel heartburn, you feel infectious. All that happens due to pitta. What are the signs of imbalance that you can look out for physically? Rashes, heat, burning sensations, acne, sensitivity to light. अगर आपका पित्त ज्यादा है, then going out in the sun can make it even worse. So you will realize कि summers के अंदर आप बाहर जाते हैं, it takes away your appetite. क्योंकि पित्त अगर बढ़ गया है तो already your body will tell you कि मुझे खाना नहीं खाना है. That is the sign that our body gives us. What are the psychological signs we need to look at? हम बोलते हैं ना कि जब वो गर्मी में गुस्सा ज्यादा आता है या PMS में हमको गुस्सा ज्यादा आता है, all that is because the pitta is aggravated. It is not a cooling function. It is made of fire and water. Okay, so understand the properties and then you will be able to connect the dots. Now where does all this take us? अब त्रिदोषा हमने समझ लिया, वात पित्त कफ सब हमने समझ लिया. Now what are we going to do? First of all, I want you to just ask yourself one question. You don't have to share it with me or anybody else, but have you ever thought that menstruation is actually a gift to womankind? हम कभी शायद ऐसा सोचते नहीं है ना कि हर महीने ये जो मैं ब्लीड कर रही हूँ ये बहुत बड़ा बून है या ब्लेसिंग है या गिफ्ट है. Maybe that is not a word that we associate with it. यूजुअली व्हाट वी थिंक इज कि अरे यार अभी मुझे जाना था, अभी मेरा पीरियड्स आ गए, अभी मेरे फ्रेंड्स ये आउटिंग प्लान कर रहे हैं, तभी मेरी डेट आने वाली है, अभी इसकी शादी है एंड आई एम गोइंग टू बी अराउंड यू नो wearing a sanitary napkin all around, or you know मैं कैसे enjoy करूंगी. So usually unfortunately what happens is कि हम ऐसे ही सारे thoughts उसके साथ हैं. Our self talk about menstruation is usually as if it is some sort of inconvenience and it is a pain that we have to bear. It is some sort of curse that only women have been given. God knows why. And then we say God must be a man. You know, we've never thought that menstruation is actually a gift. Now, the beauty of our ancient sciences and Ayurveda is that it identifies and it accords a lot of importance to menstruation, which is why even now, at least in South India, there are elaborate rituals that are held to honor and to celebrate a girl who has just started menstruating. That onset of menstruation is called menarche. So the time a girl gets her first period, there are elaborate rituals and celebrations that are held, nothing short of a wedding celebration. Why is this done? The answer is in what you see next. Okay? क्या होता है कि हमारा जो brain है, shall we need to see the image? हमारा जो brain है, there are different parts of the brain. One part of the brain is called the hippocampus, जो यहाँ पे आपको red में दिख रहा है. One part of the brain is called the hippocampus. What is the function of hippocampus? Hippocampus का काम होता है to retrieve memories from the subconscious mind. Now think of special occasions in your life. हम लोग सब irrespective of age, जब हमारा birthday आने वाला होता है ना, so there is some level of excitement. The excitement can vary depending on various factors. But I don't know anyone who says कि यार मेरा birthday आ रहा है, यार I don't like it one bit. I've never heard anybody say that. There is some flutter of excitement internally, whether we express it or we don't express it. Now why is that? क्योंकि birthdays पे लोग आपको pamper करते हैं, लोग आपको gifts देते हैं. People take the time to wish you, you know, they say a few good things about you. They just make you feel happy around that time. That is why birthdays are special. Now, where does hippocampus come in here? Hippocampus is responsible for memories, and birthdays, they occur once a year. So it is episodic memory. You know, साल में एक बार आपको बर्थडे पे अच्छा लगता है. वो इसलिए लगता है क्योंकि आपके हिप्पोकैम्पस में बर्थडेज नाम के फोल्डर में अच्छी मेमोरीज जमा है. नाउ बर्थडेज कम वंस अ ईयर, मेंस्ट्रुएशन हैपेंस एट लीस्ट 11 to 12 टाइम्स अ ईयर. और हर बार अगर हम रोते रहेंगे, then what kind of memories are we creating? Every time we start bleeding, if we are cursing ourselves, then obviously the hippocampus, poor guy, will only throw up what is present in its folders. That is why celebrations were held. Now I understand there was no celebration when I got my first period. I don't know how many of you had a celebration. But that does not mean that we cannot change that memory. We can always change. For example, let's say you were learning to cycle. और साइकिलिंग करते करते अभी आपने सीखा नहीं है और आप गिर गए, तो आपके पास में हमेशा दो ऑप्शंस, हमारे पास में कैसे उसको रिस्पॉन्ड करना है, कैसे डील करना है. वी ऑलवेज हैव मल्टीपल ऑप्शंस अवेलेबल. यू कैन टेल योरसेल्फ कि मैं गिर गई, अब मुझे साइकिल चलानी ही नहीं है. Or you can tell yourself that, okay, maybe I will revisit it after some time. कुछ दिन बाद, कुछ महीने बाद, maybe when I'm feeling better, you know. So if there was no menarche celebration done when you got your first period, and you still keep cursing your fate every month when you bleed, you still have the time. We still have the opportunity to change those memories now that we have this new knowledge. And when I tell you what are some of the gifts, there are a lot of gifts. I'm going to share 3 with you. Then you can decide what you want to do with your memory folder and the hippocampus. Okay, so let's look at what are the gifts that menstruation offers to us. Over to the next slide. Okay, so 2-3 चीजें हैं जो बहुत ही जरूरी है हमको इस कॉन्टेक्स्ट में समझना. सबसे पहले हमको क्या जानने की जरूरत है? It is an indication of overall health. Okay, हम लोग जब छोटे थे और हम किसी जनरल प्रैक्टिशनर, कोई नॉर्मल डॉक्टर, जीपी, फैमिली डॉक्टर के पास जाते थे, तो ऐसे आपकी आंख को अच्छे से देखेगा, वो आपको बोलेगा कि जबान बाहर निकाल के दिखाओ. These were indicators. He is trying to look at some things which will tell you what the overall state of your health is. That is why वो स्टेथोस्कोप लगा के आपका हार्ट बीट वगैरह सुनते हैं ना. It is an indicator. Menstruation is an excellent indicator of overall health. Okay, that is why Ayurveda says कि अगर आपके periods irregular हैं, modern science also tells you that अगर आपके periods irregular हैं, अगर बहुत excessive bleeding हो रही है, बहुत ही scanty bleeding हो रही है, अगर आपको पीरियड्स के साथ में बहुत सारे अलग सिम्टम्स हैं, आपको साथ में लूज मोशन भी हो रहा है, आपको साथ में वॉमिटिंग भी हो रही है, कॉम्बिनेशन ऑफ थिंग्स आर हैपनिंग, या आपका जो पीरियड का ब्लड है अगर उसमें क्लॉट्स निकल रहे हैं, या वो ब्लड का कलर जो है, जो हमको पता है कि रेड होना चाहिए या शेड ऑफ रेड होना चाहिए, अगर वो ब्राउन है, देयर आर सो मेनी पैरामीटर्स. सो एवरी मंथ यूजुअली क्या होता है कि जब हम बीमार होते हैं और डॉक्टर बोलता है कि XYZ टेस्ट कराओ, तो हम ब्लड टेस्ट करवाते हैं. आई नो वेरी फ्यू पीपल जो साल में एक बार एक ब्लड चेकअप या एक ओवरऑल हेल्थ चेकअप करवाते एज अ प्रिवेंटिव मेजर. I had a meeting with a gynac recently for Adya Shakti, and she said, people will happily pay you a lot of money when they are dying, but you tell them कि आपको साल में एक बार ये टेस्ट कराना है, and they will shy away. They will say कि सब ठीक है ना, अभी क्यों पैसे डालते हैं. So that is unfortunate, but we have that gift of menstruation. If we observe our menstrual cycle, our pattern, what the blood flow is like, the quantity, the color, the consistency, etc., it becomes an indicator. So every month your body is communicating with you about the overall state of your health. That is just one of the gifts. Another extremely beneficial gift of menstruation is that it works as a phase of elimination. Now, some of you जिनको आयुर्वेद के बारे में थोड़ा आपने सुना होगा, पंचकर्मा usually everybody is heard of. Panchakarma is a series. Pancha means 5. Okay, तो 5 types of cleansing processes किए जाते हैं पंचकर्मा में, जिससे आपके बॉडी के अलग अलग सेंटर्स में जो भी टॉक्सिन्स है ना, उनको रिलीज किया जाता है. जैसे आपको पानी पिला के वॉमिट कराया जाता है फॉर दैट ओरल एंड योर इंटेस्टाइनल ट्रैक्ट का जो पूरा क्लेंजिंग है, उसके लिए आपको अनीमा देके वहां से भी रिलीज कराए जाते हैं टॉक्सिन्स, ताकि आप पूरा जो आपका ट्रैक है वो पूरा आपका कोलोन वगैरह क्लीन हो जाए. अब हम लोग दिन में जब भी खाते हैं, whatever we eat, no matter how well we eat, there is some food that is remaining maybe undigested. Okay, अब वो खाना कहाँ जाता है, वो हमारी जो इंटेस्टाइन्स है, इतनी बड़ी हमारी इंटेस्टाइन्स है, वो कहीं ना कहीं कॉर्नर्स में जाके वो अटक जाता है. आयुर्वेदा refers to that as ama. Okay, ama or toxins, and we all know that toxins are not a good thing to have within the body. During menstruation serves like a natural panchakarma. Now, a lot of you may have experienced, I have definitely experienced this, कि menstruation के time पे, आपका bowel movement ज्यादा होता है. अगर usually if you need to relieve yourself once a day, कभी-कभी menstruation के time पे it can also happen twice a day, thrice a day. It can also be semi-solid or a little loose motion kind of thing. Now, that is natural panchakarma at work. I know somebody जिसको periods के time पे बहुत सर्दी होती है. Maybe her usual prakriti is of Kapha Dosh. तो इतनी सर्दी होती है that she takes a tablet, which is not a good thing to do, because आपकी body cleansing mode में है और आप उसको suppress कर रहे हैं. The idea is always to let the cleansing go. Of course, I am no doctor and authority on that, but just giving you an example. Skin पे आपको acne कई बार होती है, because पित्त का भी काम है, क्योंकि skin से भी toxins release किए जाते हैं. So this is how menstruation month on month आपकी body का शुद्धिकरण होता है through the process of menstruation. Now, last is a very, very fascinating thing, and it is a very heartening thing also. Recently, modern science has started identifying the power of menstrual blood. Okay, we've all heard of blood banking. We've also heard of breast milk banking. Now, research is going on. Now, what happens in menstruation? जो आपका endometrial lining है, वो shed होता है. वो shed हो गया, लेकिन उसको वापस recreate करना है ना, तो कफा दोष predominant होता है. फिर से वो सेल्स जनरेट होते हैं, फिर से वो लाइनिंग तैयार होता है, फिर से वो शेड किया जाता है. सो अंडरस्टैंड द रीजनरेटिव पावर एंड द पावर ऑफ दैट मेंस्ट्रुअल ब्लड, जिसके स्टेम सेल्स में कितनी ताकत होगी, कितनी हीलिंग कैपेसिटी होगी. वी नो दैट स्टेम सेल कॉर्ड बैंकिंग ऑल्सो हैपेंस. तो बच्चे का जो अम्बिलिकल कॉर्ड होता है, उसमें जो स्टेम सेल्स होते हैं, जो उसको पूरा न्यूट्रिशन प्लेसेंटा से मिलता है ड्यूरिंग गेस्टेशन, वो स्टेम सेल्स बहुत सारे लोग आजकल दे हैव इट प्रिजर्व, ताकि आगे जाके बच्चे को अगर कोई ऐसा कैंसर या कोई ऐसा डिजीज हो जिसमें वो स्टेम सेल्स यूज कर सके फॉर रीजेनरेशन, then people spend a lot of money to save those stem cells. Now, menstruation month on month is giving you the same potency through that menstrual blood, and it is very heartening to know that modern science is working on it. I hope that is reason enough to change the memory in the hippocampus. Going forward from here, okay, we come to a very, very important topic called Rajaswala Paricharya. Rajaswala Paricharya is nothing but the recommended regime as per Ayurveda as to what are the do's and don'ts that a menstruating woman should be following. Now, when we say menstruating woman, stay put, huh, Shalu? When we say menstruating woman, we are talking about the whole reproductive age. Menarche, मतलब first period से लेके menopause तक, हर एक period में आपको ये regime follow करना चाहिए is what Ayurveda says, because it is in your advantage. Before we go over the points, what does Rajaswala, यही नाम क्यों दिया? परिचर्या means regime or code of conduct. जैसे दिनचर्या होता है ना कि आपका एक डेली रूटीन कैसा होना चाहिए, जैसे हम बोलते हैं अर्ली टू बेड अर्ली टू राइज, इट इज अ पार्ट ऑफ दिनचर्या. देन देयर इज ऋतुचर्या. ऋतु मींस सीजन. तो जैसे हमारा सीजनल में कोड ऑफ कॉन्डक्ट होता है, जैसे अभी बारिश का मौसम आएगा तो ग्रीन लीफी वेजिटेबल्स नहीं खानी चाहिए बिकॉज दे आर लॉट मोर प्रोन टू गिविंग राइज टू इंसेक्ट्स एंड इन्फेक्शन उससे आपको बहुत ज्यादा हो जाते हैं इफ यू हैविंग दैट. तो हमारे पास दिन कैसे व्यतीत करना है, सीजन या ऋतु के हिसाब से आपको कैसे अपना जीवन शैली मॉनिटर करनी है, मॉडिफाई करनी है, ऑल दैट इज हाईलाइटेड इन आयुर्वेद. Similarly, how a woman of the reproductive age between menarche to menopause should be conducting herself is what Rajaswala. Why Rajas? So if you've heard of Triguna, three again means three. Triguna is जो आपने सुना होगा, सत्वो, रजो and तमो, या सात्विक, रजसिक और तामसिक. रजस जो है, that is the quality of action, being active, of transforming. Vala means letting go. तो ये जो आपके पीरियड्स के दिन हैं, जितने भी वो दिन होते हैं, you're supposed to let go of being highly active and instead do some other things. What are those other things? We'll look at that now. Okay, so starting with pathya. Pathya means do's, apatya means don'ts. Now आपने ये सुना होगा, and unfortunately there is a lot of superstition, and I really believe the superstition only arises out of lack of knowledge. If everybody knows what our texts and our acharyas have already left with us, then there would be no scope for superstition. Okay, pathya में कहा गया है that a menstruating woman should ideally be secluded. उसका ये मतलब नहीं है कि वो उस टाइम पर impure है या वो अछूत है. We need to understand that because she is undergoing that ritu wala phase, the menstruation wala phase, her immunity is low. देखो बहुत सिंपल सी बात है, अगर आप कोई उंगली कट जाती है, you know, तो आप फिर वापस उसी उंगली से काम करते रहते हैं या आप उसको रेस्ट देते हैं, you give it a break ना, ताकि उसकी हीलिंग जल्दी से हो. Here a part of your uterus is shedding and it is happening month after month. That is the time when you need to recharge your batteries. You need to take a back seat. You don't have to be out in the open and doing everything that you do in your routine. इसीलिए आपको, you know, traditionally ladies had a separate room also because their prana is also low. They are low on immunity. They are highly prone to contracting infections. You know, when COVID was very new, so we all took care कि हमको अपने घर में जितने भी seniors हैं और जो बच्चे हैं उनको बाहर नहीं भेजना है. क्यों नहीं भेजना है? क्योंकि उनकी इम्यूनिटी लो है. So we cannot take the chance of them contracting. It will affect their bodies a lot more harshly than it will affect maybe an adult's body. That was the logic. It is the same logic. अगर आपकी इम्यूनिटी लो है तो फिर आप क्यों ऐसे माहौल में खुद को एक्सपोज करोगे जहां पे बहुत सारे लोग हैं and you're in a vulnerable state. Okay? Then we come to apatya. तो अगर ये नहीं, आपको secluded रहना है या आपको कम लोगों में interact करना है, तो obviously one of the don'ts is against socializing. You don't go in very crowded places. You don't hobnob, you know, and go out partying and everything of that sort. I know कि ये सुन के किसी ना किसी के मन में तो आएगा, how is that bloody possible in the modern culture and our lifestyle? So we'll come to that. You know, that is why we have a Q&A session. Okay, over to the next one. Now, please understand that this is coming from the menarche point of view. तो जब किसी लड़की को पहली बार periods आते हैं, she's not experienced it before. She's never seen blood coming out of her vaginal area. Obviously, it is going to be a little overwhelming. She may have a lot of questions. She may not understand कि मैं suddenly इतना weak क्यों feel कर रही हूँ. Hormones are at a dizzy level because estrogen और progesterone कम हो गए, तो उससे mood पे फर्क पड़ेगा. She may want to cry. तो उसको अकेला नहीं छोड़ना है is what Ayurveda says. She should be accompanied by an elderly woman, somebody that she's comfortable with, so that she can console her, she can speak her heart out. अब अपथ्य में क्या आता है उसके सामने, that you should not be totally cut out. Okay, ऐसे नहीं कि आप बोलो कि अच्छा अब मैं बड़ी हो गई, I don't know how it works. I'll be very honest with you. There are still days. I'm 40 years old and I started menstruating when I was 12, I think. So it's been such a long journey, and there are still days when during my menstruation, I end up crying for no reason. I feel so overwhelmed and I feel like, nothing is going in my favor. मैं क्या कर रही हूँ और कुछ भी अच्छा नहीं लग रहा है. I still have those days. So it is a good idea not to be completely cut off, to have your lifelines and your helplines open. Okay. Another pathya that we come to is the diet. Now, like I told you, Ayurveda looks at the whole, and it looks at how the parts are constantly intermingling and influencing the whole. तो आहार के ऊपर आयुर्वेद पे बहुत ज्यादा फोकस किया गया है. Now understand कि जैसे हमने कहा कि Vata and Pitta is predominant. Pitta is the energy of transformation, fire, Agni dominant. Vata जो है is the energy of movement. अब आपके periods शुरू हैं और अगर आप ऐसा कुछ खाते हैं जो आपके सिस्टम के साथ अग्री नहीं करने वाला है, your body is going to revolt in ways that you do not want, at least not those days of the month. So what Ayurveda said and also recognized, the blood is flowing. That is why आप अगर अपने periods के time पे कभी भी अपना hemoglobin check कराएंगे, iron levels check कराएंगे, they will be low. आप periods हो जाने के कुछ दिन बाद करवाइए, they will be back to normal if they were already normal, that is. Okay? So Ayurveda recognizes that your body needs to be nourished. आपको micronutrients मिलने चाहिए, आपको जो भी body के लिए जरूरी है वो मिलना चाहिए, because already immunity low है. So there are certain foods that it definitely highlighted on that are easy to digest, easy on the palate, will create antioxidants in the body, will not vitiate pitta or vata, and also give you antiseptic and anti-infectious properties, which is where turmeric water comes. Okay, what is it that Ayurveda tells you not to have during your menstrual cycle is highly processed food, which means everything that comes from a packet, which comes with a shelf life of 6 months, 9 months. आप सोचिए कि अगर आप घर में दही भी जमाते हैं और अगर वो थोड़ी बच गई और आप उसको फ्रिज में रखना भूल गए तो वो ओवरनाइट खराब हो जाएगी. It will not be fit for consumption. If you still have it, you may end up with loose motion. The body wants to throw it out, boss. The body does not want it. So imagine a packaged food which comes with a shelf life of 6 months, 9 months, 12 months, और वो खराब नहीं होगा इतने टाइम. तो उसको वो खराब ना हो उसके लिए उसमें क्या क्या डाला गया और उस टाइम पे आपको वो आर्टिफिशियल प्रेजर्वेटिव्स और कलर्स और उन सब की जरूरत है या होलसम फूड की जरूरत है. सो प्रोसेस्ड, फ्रोजन, स्टेल फूड दैट इज डिप्राइव्ड ऑफ प्राणा. Prana is vital life source. Look at our language and how beautifully it brings these concepts to our conversations. जब कोई गुजर जाता है हम बोलते हैं उन्होंने प्राण त्याग दिए. जब तक प्राण है तब तक आदमी को जिंदा माना जाता है. प्राण is not just breath, प्राण is vitality, प्राण is energy. वरना सांस तो आप आर्टिफिशियली भी वेंटिलेटर पे रख के सांस चलती रहती है, पर प्राण है या नहीं, that's a different matter, right? So we need to have food that is pranic in energy, because already a menstruating woman's prana is depleting. A part of her body is shedding. She is not at her peak. So she needs to supplement that with pranic food. Okay? Which brings us to the next one. Next point, Shalu. These are very important things, and you will realize कि क्यों खिचड़ी को इतनी importance दी गई है, because it is easy on the palate and it kind of keeps you recharged. Very important that somebody who is menstruating should have food cooked by a person who is not menstruating at that time. Now, pay close attention to what I'm going to say. It is so fascinating, it is so deep and yet so commonsensical. तुलसी का जो पौधा होता है, तुलसी का जो प्लांट है, it holds a lot of value, a lot of sacred value also, and a lot of medicinal value also. There has been research done, and I will tell you where to find it. There has been research done on how if a menstruating woman tends to a tulsi plant, अगर वो एक तुलसी के पौधे के कांटेक्ट में जा रही है, छू रही है, उसको पानी डाल रही है, chances of that tulsi plant withering, उसके मुरझाने के chances ज्यादा होते हैं. You know why? Tulsi plant is highly pranic. It has medicinal properties. It is very sattvic in nature. A menstruating woman has a lot of oxidative stress. What does that mean? Please Google. Okay, certain things you should have some homework after a talk or a session. So a menstruating woman has a lot of oxidative stress. She is low on prana. So wherever she finds prana, her body takes it. If she's touching the tulsi plant's prana is going to get transferred to the menstruating woman. Same thing happens with food. When you are menstruating and you are cooking, the food will not be able to retain the same prana that it would if you made it when you were not menstruating. क्योंकि उसका प्राण बनाते बनाते आपके अंदर आ गया है. And this is not, out of thin air. I will tell you which book to read to understand the science between it, to understand about subatomic levels and to understand ions and positive and negative ions and how transfer of energy happens. It is all scientific. That is why a menstruating woman should refrain from cooking, because she is taking the prana from the food. The food is not going to taste the same. That is chalo, you can ignore it once, but it will be deprived of prana. So those who are eating the food made by a menstruating woman are not going to get the nutrition that it was supposed to offer to them. Unfortunately, we painted it with superstition and said a menstruating woman is impure, तो उनको रसोई में नहीं जाना चाहिए. उनके रसोई में ना जाने के लिए ये कारण है जो सही है. Okay, which brings us to another very important topic. इतना सब हमने परिचर्या समझ लिया क्या करना है. What about exercise? So I have had a lot of students asking me कि आप हमेशा बोलते हो कि पीरियड्स के पहले 3 दिन तो आपको आसन प्रैक्टिस नहीं ही बिल्कुल नहीं करनी है, और अगर आपको हेवी पीरियड्स है, आपको डिस्कम्फर्ट है, then throughout your menstruation you should not be doing asan practice. Why just asan? Let's look at why heavy exercise overall is also contraindicated during menstruation. Now look at Vata dosha and what aggravates. हमारे जो भी दोष है ना, उनको चीजें मंद भी कर सकती है, मतलब उनको डाइल्यूट भी किया जा सकता है और एग्रेवेट भी किया जा सकता है अपने ही लाइफस्टाइल से. So Vata dosha gets aggravated by running, jumping, practicing inversions. That is why I always, when I have an inversions class lined up, I tell my students, no matter which day of your periods it is, no matter how less the flow is, if it is an inversions class, please do not attend the class. Vata की position क्या थी? Navel के नीचे. उसका डाउनवर्ड मूवमेंट का टाइम होता है जब हम मेंस्ट्रुएट करते हैं. When you're menstruating, why do you want to go upside down and stop that flow? I'll tell you one more very interesting thing. As a child, I was very curious, not a child, but when I was newly, I had started menstruating. So I would think अब नहाने जाऊंगी तो पूरा bathroom में blood होगा. But that never happened. When I was bathing, it's not like, there was blood flowing, and I was very curious. It is now that I understand that if you stand under running water, if you're taking a shower or whatever, that also stops your blood flow temporarily, which is why swimming during periods is a very bad idea. It disturbs your vata. Running, jumping, all these things that go against the flow of the vata, which is supposed to be downward. Why it is so unfortunate that people may not know this, cabin crew, flight में जो काम करते हैं, when you're taking a flight, it is anti-gravity movement. It is against the flow of gravity. So, ठीक है, आपका कोई schedule है, आपको periods आ गए, you have to take a flight. I'm not saying miss the flight. But if these things are done on a regular basis, month on month, as part of one's vocation, then there is something that you are subjecting the body to, and that one needs to be aware of. Stress also aggravates pitta. We need to be careful about that too. तो क्या होगा अगर आपने heavy exercise की even during PMS time, क्योंकि body is in preparation mode. हमको पता चल जाता है ना 1-2 दिन में period आने वाला है. क्यों पता चल जाता है? Because body हमको वो signals देती है. अगर हम उन signals को respect नहीं करते हैं और हम heavy exercise करते हैं, then these are the things that can happen. It can understand that periods are obviously linked to your fertility. So it will affect your fertility, it will affect your pregnancy, birthing, a lot of things. You're also more prone to getting injured. It will also slow down your recovering because your body is at its lowest in terms of prana, in terms of energy. उसमें आपने उसको extra काम दे दिया है. So it's not going to really work in your favor. ever. Okay, now there is one very fascinating thing that we need to understand when we are also exercising. There is something known as miserable misalignment syndrome. Okay, what is this syndrome about? इस सिंड्रोम में क्या होता है कि आपका जो फीमर है, जो हमारे थाई के अंदर बोन होता है, इट इज आई थिंक द लार्जेस्ट, द स्ट्रॉन्गेस्ट, द हेवीएस्ट बोन इन द ह्यूमन बॉडी. सो द फीमर एंड टिबिया इज अ बोन विच इज इन द शिन एरिया. तो आपका नी है, नी के ऊपर फीमर है, नी के नीचे टिबिया है. What this syndrome is about कि इस सिंड्रोम अगर आपको हो गया, मतलब आपका जो फीमर और टिबिया है वो या तो अंदर की तरफ टर्न हो जाते हैं या तो बाहर की तरफ टर्न हो जाते हैं. दैट्स व्हाई इट इज कॉल्ड अ मिसअलाइनमेंट सिंड्रोम. और अगर किसी को ये सिंड्रोम हो गया तो उनको क्या होता है, उनको नी पेन, हिप, एंकल, बैक पेन, ये सब होता है. नाउ women are already more vulnerable to getting this syndrome as compared to men. And why is that? Because anatomically we are extremely different. Hormonally we are very different. Men have testosterone, we also have testosterone, but in negligible quantities when compared to men. Okay, so that is why muscle strength, bone weight, ये आदमियों में ज्यादा होता है, औरतों में comparatively कम होता है. In addition to that, we have a wider pelvis to facilitate conception, childbirth, everything. तो हमारा pelvis भी जो है वो broad होता है. प्लस हमारे इतने जो अलग अलग हार्मोनल फ्लक्चुएशंस होते हैं, तो ऑलरेडी हमारी जो शरीर की बनावट है वो ऐसी है कि we have the gifts of menstruation, but there are certain things that we need to be cautious about. That is why this whole thing of comparing ourselves to men, कि अगर आदमी कर सकते हैं तो हम क्यों नहीं कर सकते हैं, वो क्यों नहीं करना चाहिए, उसकी जायज वजह है. वो वजह जब आपको पता चल जाए, उसके बाद भी अगर आप उसको फॉलो करते रहे, then that is pretty tragic. But I hope you will not be amongst those people. Which is why heavy exercise, inversions, taxing things are something that you're supposed to steer clear of during your menstruation and a few days before that also. Which takes us to the next thing. Okay. So this is something that I've already explained. Okay. That is why heavy workouts are to be avoided. Then, what are the yogic practices that are recommended for menstruation? Before we come to that, we need to understand that Ashtang Yoga is called Ashtang Yoga because it has 8 parts. Ashta means 8. So there is Yam, Niyam, Asan, Pranayam, and then there are other things that happen. Okay? तो ये जो 8 है, इनको 2 भाग में विभाजित किया गया, which is called Antarang Yoga and Bahirang Yoga, which means internal and external. Okay? अब इसमें कैसे होता है कि जो यम नियम है, these are your social principles, these are your individual principles, कि आपका जो behavior है वो कैसे होना चाहिए, आपको सच बोलना चाहिए, आपको hygiene follow करना चाहिए, आपको devotion होना चाहिए, all these. So these are things that you practice as an individual in society या समाज के अंदर आप वैसे रहते हैं. आसन and प्राणायाम you already know, जो आप शरीर के माध्यम से करते हैं, physically आपको उसको करना पड़ता है. These are बहिरंग और externally practiced. जो अंतरंग होता है वो इसके बाद के होते हैं. Shalom, if you could have the points on the screen, please. तो वो जो है वो इंटरनल होते हैं. तो यम, नियम, आसन, प्राणायाम, प्रत्याहार, धारणा, ध्यान, समाधि. ओके, तो जब आसन और क्रिया की बात होती है, जब योगा की आसन, आपको मेंस्ट्रुएशन में क्या करना चाहिए? So what is recommended are restorative poses. Shavasana everybody knows and everybody loves. Why do we love Shavasana so much? We love it because it gives you a chance to be still. It gives you a chance to let go. It gives you a chance to just be in the moment, to be in the present. That is why we love Shavasana. वो बोलने के लिए भले हम बोलते हैं कि अरे अभी तो सो जाना, बहुत मेहनत कर ली, now you know we are being rewarded with Shavasana. But that is what Shavasana does to you. It induces a state of calmness. And when your Vata and Pitta is working, you know, and if God forbid if it is aggravated, then you need to do more of these restorative poses. And very soon we will be releasing YouTube videos on these poses and kriyas, so all of you can benefit from that. Okay, so those are the things that we should do. Tratak is a very important Shuddhi kriya. There are Shata kriya or 6 cleansing processes or techniques that Ayurveda and Yoga have given us, you know, especially Hatha Yoga. So Tratak is a form of emotional cleansing. Some of you may have heard of it, some of you may have done it. Typically candle flame पे focus करके उसको किया जाता है without blinking. एक आप रोशनी जलाते हैं कैंडल की, ट्यूबलाइट की नहीं, लाइट की नहीं, और आप उसको बिना ब्लिंक किए देखते हैं. You let the tears flow. Okay? It does a lot of emotional cleansing. Also, scientifically, it works on the pineal gland. It helps you sleep better. A lot of women, especially as they are nearing menopause, they start feeling कि नींद की quality और quantity दोनों कम होते जा रहे हैं. They're not able to sleep well. Tratak helps them with that. It lets you release. वो जो आप angst feel करते हैं ना, बहुत सारे मैं भी feel करती हूँ हर PMS में, कि गुस्सा ज्यादा आता है या पेशेंस कम हो रहा है, वो अंदर जैसे बहुत सारी churning हो रही है. It helps you release that. It helps you calm your mind. It's a cleansing process. What else is recommended? Yoga Nidra. Okay, those of you who've been practicing yoga must have definitely experienced Yoga Nidra. And you know how it makes you feel rejuvenated. You feel like you're ready to take charge. मतलब reboot. जैसे हम system को reboot करते हैं, हमारा reboot हो जाता है Yoga Nidra के बाद में. That is what you require when you are menstruating. Okay. And another thing is Pratipaksh Bhavna. So we already have videos on Pratipaksh Bhavna, which we will share again. If you are not on our groups, then you can tell us and we will share those with you. So my colleague and partner and friend Shifali, who is handling this session, she has released beautiful videos on Pratipaksh Bhavna, how they work and how they help you hold your own. Understand that every month menstruation gives you a charge to hit the reset button. Physically, cleansing हो रही है, emotionally आपको बहुत सारी चीजें, a lot of decisions, a lot of clarity comes to you if you take that step of pratyahar, which is the fifth limb of Ashtanga. Pratyahar is a withdrawal of senses. So जब हम बोलते हैं कि menstruating woman should be allowed to just be, we want to give her the space and the time to reflect, to introspect, to go over things. And maybe that is when she will be able to take some decisions that are not working for her. Maybe she's stuck in some situation, some relationship, some project, some work, some equation that if she lets go of, she will be better off. These things will intuitively come to her at the time of Ritu or menstruation. That is what Ayurveda and Yoga recommend. Okay, so this is what should be done, not heavy weight lifting, not something that is going to work against your own body and nature. Now, at the end of this, there is something. Over to the next slide, Shifali. If there is only one book that you have to read in this life, may this be that book. Okay? It is a recommended reading from our side. Okay? As Adya Shakti, we are recommending every woman to read this and then maybe gift it to the men in your life so that, when they don't understand, usually my wife is so calm and quiet and cooperative and what has gotten into her? This book holds answers to those questions. A lot of questions that you may have कि periods में ये क्यों नहीं करना है, वो क्यों नहीं करना है. Sino Joseph has done that painstaking work of collating it all together in this one book. Please do yourselves a favor and read it. Thank you very much for participating. Thank you for listening so patiently. If anybody has any questions now, I'll be happy to take them. I am not an expert and I will not make that claim. If there are questions that I'm not able to answer, you can bet that I will go back to the research and find answers and get back to you. But I'll be very happy to take answers now. Thank you, Surbi. Thank you so much. I'm glad you found it insightful. Anybody, any questions? I'm here to take them. And please stay because if you have any feedback, we would love to take that as well. You can unmute and ask. I'll be happy to take that.
Hi, Salima Mama, Mother. Surbi this side.
Absolutely. I'm so glad you joined. Thank you so much, dear.
Pleasure's all mine. So I have a question and it's out of my personal experience. I think until I was 24, 25, there was no issue, normal jaise hota tha waise. And then suddenly from last 6 years, I've started having extreme cramps and vomits on day one.
Right.
Okay. Went for basic checkups. I've been doing it pretty regularly, but the only thing that most doctors told, it's pretty hormonal. You can't really do much. I do exercises. I try and keep a proper diet stuff. But the only thing that has helped me here was taking like 2 medicines a day, like a morning and evening. And then that sorts it.
Okay.
But I don't know, wanted to understand if you have a view on it or yeah.
Right. So, I'm glad you brought that out because sometimes what happens is that हमको लगता है कि इतने साल तक नहीं हुआ तो अब क्यों हो रहा है, या तो हमको लगता है कि अच्छा शुरू के कुछ सालों में ये होता है, बाद में ये सब normal हो जाएगा. These are typically the two viewpoints that we encounter when we talk about these things. Now, what we need to understand after all the knowledge that we have, and one very important disclaimer here, that just going on the basis, even Sinu Joseph says that in her book, कि आप कोई बुक पढ़ के ये डिसाइड मत करिए कि आपकी प्रकृति क्या है, आपका कौन सा दोष प्रेडोमिनेंट है, कौन से दोष का इम्बैलेंस है. Please don't arrive at that. It is always good to have a nadi parikshan done, which is like the pulse reading that a Ved will do for you, ask you questions and tell you so many things. So since you already said that you kind of are active, you maintain an active lifestyle, you pay attention to your diet. Now we need to understand that part, that all the parts are working on the whole. So now that you are already aware of a pattern, my suggestion to you would be to understand कि what are your days like, and also understand कि सिर्फ PMS या menstruation के 3-4 दिन नहीं, पूरा जो महीने में जो कुछ भी हुआ है, it is going to finally indicate something during menstruation. Very another important fascinating thing, I just thought कि कितना लंबा ही बोलेंगे webinar में, but the phases of the moon, the moon is called a स्त्री ग्रह, it is a female planet. तो जो मून की वैक्सिंग और वेनिंग होती है ना, उससे भी हमारे हॉर्मोन्स पर, हमारे त्रिदोषा पर काम होता है. And there is research which has proven that when your periods are closer to Purnima, they are going to be more, even if you have some sort of issues during your regular menstruation, if it is closer to Purnima or the full moon, तो आपको जो तकलीफ होती है उसकी intensity कम होगी, unless the body is really unwell and disturbed from within. अगर आपके पीरियड्स अमावस के साथ में क्लोज होते हैं तो आपको थोड़ी ज्यादा तकलीफ होने के चांसेस होते हैं, फॉर द सिंपल रीजन दैट अमावस के टाइम पे द फीमेल बॉडी की इम्यूनिटी इज लोअर, इवन द मेल बॉडी. सो इफ यू एवर गॉट रेनोवेशन वर्क डन, आपको पता होगा कि घर में जो पेंटर आता है, कड़िया काम वाला आता है, सुतार आता है, अमावस पे कोई काम नहीं करता है. अमावस पे किसान लोग बीज नहीं बोते हैं क्योंकि उसकी ग्रोथ वैसी नहीं होगी जैसी नॉन अमावस टाइम पे होगी. It is the time for everybody to just take a break. लेकिन अगर उस टाइम पे आपके साइकिल आते हैं तो आपकी नेचुरल इम्यूनिटी ऑलरेडी लो है. That is one aspect. Another aspect, of course, is how you're feeling emotionally, relationship wise, stress level क्या है, नींद कैसी हो रही है, disturbed हो रही है, sound हो रही है, lot of things. So it is a whole that you will have to start paying attention to. I think it makes a lot of sense to maybe just note down these things कि क्या खाया था और क्या agree नहीं किया होगा. Just an example. Always a good idea to visit a Ved for a deeper investigation.
Definitely. Thank you so much, Salima Barman.
Thank you, Sylvie. Thank you for asking. Anyone else? Be my guest.
Ma'am?
Yes.
I'm Lisa here.
Yes.
I wanted to ask that you told that we shouldn't do heavy exercises during the menstrual cycle.
Yes.
For example, like even jogging and running. So
Yes.
is it okay if we go for evening walks every day during that period?
That's a very good question, Lisha. So until recently, even I used to do that. For somebody who's used to doing something on a daily basis, मुझे लगता था कि महीने में 3 दिन 4 दिन मैं कुछ भी नहीं करूं तो मुझे अच्छा नहीं लगेगा. Now let's contextualize this again from what we've already gone through in the webinar. The immunity is low for a menstruating woman. आपकी जो natural immunity है, body की जो natural capacity है to fight infections etc. is already low. When you are going out in the environment, you are exposing yourself to a lot of things. Now, based on your overall immunity and how your body recoups or overcomes, infections, fever, viral, etc. अगर आपको बहुत समय लगता है, आपको अपनी body का track record पता है, so you don't want to unnecessarily expose yourself to more organisms in the environment and invite that upon yourself. Okay? तो इसीलिए उस टाइम पे ये कहा जाता है कि आप ज्यादा लोगों में भी बाहर नहीं जाए, आप जनरली भी ज्यादा बाहर नहीं जाए, जो हम पूरी तरीके से अवॉइड नहीं कर सकते हैं. But the more you keep yourself protected, the better it is. That's what I would say.
Okay, ma'am. Thank you.
Thank you, Lisha. Anyone else? Okay, that's good to know. I'm hoping that you could connect a lot of dots, that you will look at your menstrual cycle as a gift and not like a curse. And you will also pass this on to people in your family, your friend circle, all the women Maybe the men also, why not? Men also should need to know this. If anybody would like to share any feedback, whether as a chat message or you would want to tell us aloud, we'll be very happy to know. This subject is very close to us and we want to do extensive work and ongoing work on this subject, because I think it all starts from awareness and knowledge. और जितना हम अपनी body को और उसकी working को समझ पाएंगे, our founding principle is heyam dukkham anagatam, meaning the pain which is yet to arrive can be avoided. That is why we want to work for preventive healthcare, and that all starts from knowledge. If there's anything you would like to say, we would like to hear that. Otherwise, we'll call it a day.
Ma'am, I would like to give a feedback. I loved the session a lot because I always had this doubt that what exactly happens when women or girls start menstruating. And I had asked the same question with my mom, but she had said that she'd search it out and tell it to me in a few days. But then your session came and I was quite excited to attend it. And I got the answer to my question. So I was very happy. I got to know, like you said, many people, many girls and women think of they think that menstruating is not such a great idea. Whenever they menstruate, they start to menstruate, they become either sad or they complain about it. So the three good points that you told, like I thought about it again, and then I what can I say? I was like happy to be a girl and a woman and to menstruate, because
I am so happy to hear that, Lisha. Thank you so much for sharing that. I am so happy. I really feel the purpose of this webinar has been achieved if even one person goes back feeling better about being a woman.
Because I've heard that many women are unfortunate that they can't menstruate because of some hormonal issues. So I am very lucky to be able to menstruate. Thank you.
You're creating all the right memories in the hippocampus folder, Lisha. All the best.
Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you. Thank you, Peter.
Miss, very good session. Superb indeed. Like मुझे इतना अच्छा लगा, इतना मजा आया ना, सब मेरे all questions के answer मुझे मिल गए.
How nice. Thank you, Poonam ji. Thank you for attending. Thank you so much.
और ऐसे ही session लेते रहिए. ये टाइम मैंने इतना वो नहीं किया मेरे ग्रुप में, नेक्स्ट टाइम मैं श्योर करूंगी. आपका मतलब लाइक मुझे इतना अच्छा लगा ना, सब समझ में आया मुझे कि क्या है बेसिकली. मैं मेरे स्टूडेंट को भी बता पाऊंगी काफी सारी चीजें जो आपने आज बताई है
जी. एंड वी रिकॉर्डेड द सेशन, तो वो हम आपके साथ जरूर शेयर करेंगे ताकि आप अपने स्टूडेंट्स को भी दे सकें.
यस मिस, थैंक यू सो मच.
थैंक यू सो मच. थैंक यू. एनीवन एल्स?
Salima, I would just like to share one experience. So
yes.
You spoke about the immunity levels being low during the periods. Now, honestly, I didn't know this, but most part of my career, I have ensured that during my periods, I keep my schedule quite low key. Even if I have to go to office, I ensure that I avoid meetings or no heavy mental work or something which gives me stress. This was a conscious decision because I realized that during those days, I do feel low and I don't feel like working. But not every time you can avoid work and stay at home. But yeah, now I realized that yes, that was a right choice to make.
Yes. See, the beauty is that we are more intuitive during our menstruation. Like Sinu Joseph writes in her book, a lot of matter for this webinar has come from Sinu Joseph's book. And she says that we are automatically more attuned and our body wants to be heard. It is giving us a lot of indications. We just need to tap into that and make life easier for ourselves. Thank you.
Also, I would like to know from your side. So there are a lot of superstitions. You mentioned about the Tulsi path. Now, I have been honestly touching Tulsi plant since the time I've started menstruating, just because I was like, I want to see what happens to the Tulsi plant if I touch it. Right. Thankfully, it has always remained intact. I've never seen any issue with the plant. Great. But there are also superstitions regarding not to touch the pickle.
Yes.
What do you think about it?
So, like we know that pickle is a fermented article, ना हम उसको बना के धूप में रखते हैं 2-3 दिन, फिर वो तैयार होता है, फिर we partake of that. Now there is always, also fermented foods can also interfere with Vata. That is a different thing. That's not what your question was. But it can interfere and aggravate Vata. अगर आपको already gas है, bloating है, तो fermented खाना हर किसी को suit नहीं करेगा. Now, pickle, like we said, it has already undergone a journey of transformation. उसका प्राण थोड़ा अलग है, and it is meant to be that way. That's why हम उसमें ज़्यादा तेल, ज़्यादा नमक डालते हैं, that works as preservatives, so that it retains its prana and its qualities. When a woman is menstruating, because she is low on prana, like we said, she will take prana from whatever source is available. One thing that I did not include in the webinar is, वो जो हमने कहा था कि initially, at least the first few times that a girl starts menstruating, she should have the company of an elderly woman with her, so that if she is feeling confused, overwhelmed, fearful, she has somebody to guide her, an experienced woman. The scriptures, Ayurveda also says that whoever touches a menstruating woman or comes in close contact with her, before that person interacts with other people, that person should take a bath. Why should you take a bath? It explains that. We have positive and negative ions, okay? IONS, ions. The more negative ions you have, the better your immunity and health is. A menstruating woman has very low negative ions and more of positive ions. So when she touches somebody, वो जो हमको ठंडी में होता है ना, उसको static बोलते हैं कि हमने किसी चीज को हाथ लगाया, हमको shock लगा, okay? So interacting with a menstruating woman, if somebody is touching her, तो उनके negative ions वो menstruating woman के अंदर चले जाएंगे, so that she can regain her prana and keep herself guarded. That is how nature meant it to be. तो वो जो प्राणा है, जिसको अलग अलग शब्दों में, साइंस उसको आयंस बोलेगा, आयुर्वेद उसको प्राणा बोलेगा, तो वही जो है कि खाना नहीं बनाना है, क्योंकि खाने में भी जो भी इंग्रेडिएंट्स आप यूज कर रहे हो, उसका जो प्राण है, आप you've got the freshest of ingredients and vegetables, but after it interacts with a menstruating woman's hands and energies, it is not going to have the same prana because it has gone to her. Same thing applies to pickle. That is why, like Sino Joseph writes in her book, through her own experience, that I know that even when I followed a recipe to the T, but I'm menstruating, it will not taste the same as it will do on other days. So, like, that's the beauty of Ayurveda. Ayurveda says कि प्रत्यक्ष प्रमाण, आप खुद करके देखो, महसूस करके देखो, उसको ट्रैक करके देखो, तो आपको पता चलेगा. Very interesting what you said about the tulsi urjita. तो according to Ayurveda, जब कोई लड़की का periods होते थे, initially she would be asked to tend to the plants. Not every menstruating woman's tending to plants will cause them to wither. लेकिन अगर उसके करने से मुरझाया है, तो she would be told कि आगे से जब भी periods आएंगे, तो आपको पौधों के पास नहीं जाना है, उनको पानी नहीं देना है. लेकिन अगर आपके करने से हो रहा है, then please every cycle you abstain from that. So that is also something that works on, practical evidence.
Okay, so basically not every woman would go through that. I mean, it's not every woman who touches the plant or the plant will wither up. Okay.
Correct. Not everyone. Yeah.
Salima, I would just like to add something, Shefali here.
Yes.
Urjita, to your question. See, this is something that I've learned through my own experience. And I give this example to a lot of people who ask me कि ऐसा क्यों बोला गया है कि पिकल को हाथ मत लगाओ और ये मत करो और वो मत करो. I give them a very simple example. You as a person go to allopathic doctor with a headache, and I as a person go to allopathic doctor with an headache. Correct. Now this person, this allopathic doctor will treat you differently basis of your other symptoms and your personality and how your immunity is, and will treat me differently. Now, similar way, if you go to a Ayurvedic Vaidya, they will treat you differently according to your symptoms. But menstruation is such a general principle. Okay, like in allopathy also, there are a few things that अगर आप किसी एक friend को phone करते हो कि अच्छा मुझे बहुत headache हो रहा है, and then you notice कि whenever I go out in sun और मुझे headache होता है, and you call me saying कि अरे यार शिफाली मुझे बहुत headache हो रहा है, तो first thing I'll tell you is, did you go out in sun? Because from my experience, I have noticed that when I go out in sun, I get a headache. Okay, so these things, these traditions which are associated with the menstruation, like Salima said, they are based on each person's experience. And then over the period of time, they became a generalized tradition, which like a mother, I passed on to my daughter, because I was touching the pickle and it got spoiled. So as a mother, I tell my daughter, don't touch the pickle because it will get spoiled. It is my own personal experience which I pass on to my daughter, but doesn't mean that if my daughter also touches the pickle, it will get spoiled. The irony is that we don't visit our Vaidyas. We go to the allopathic doctors. We don't visit Vaidyas. So if you ask the same question to a Vaidya, he will ask you, like Salima said, Pratyaksha Pramana. See for your own self. Okay? See for your own self if it works for you or if it doesn't work for you. So all these, like Salima said, superstition only, it builds only if you are not aware, if you don't have knowledge. So all these superstitions around the menstruation, they start from our, ignorance, ignorance towards this process. So that is
avidya. Avidya is we call it.
Exactly. So that is why at Adya Shakti we want to just make every single woman aware of this process, so that there is no avidya. When there is no avidya, there will be no superstition, and that is what we are hoping to do through these webinars. So yeah, this is my personal experience that I wanted to share. That these come from these traditions, these myths related to menstruation. They come from personal experience which have been transferred from one generation to another. But you should see it for your own self. You should check for you. You should track your periods. You should track your cycles and see what works for you, what doesn't work for you. And obviously, you should go to a Vaidya, or you should consult somebody who knows, who has knowledge about this if you have certain questions.
Got it. In fact, I agree with what you said.
Chalo, good to know. Thank you so much, everyone.
Ma'am?
Yes.
Ma'am, it was really good to know the science behind our old beliefs, why shouldn't we cook? Why should we stay in separate rooms? So you answered many of our old beliefs very logically today.
Thank you, Purviji. I'm so glad you attended. I'm so glad. And at that point, I just want to, before you continue, even if we have cooks coming to our house, most of the cooks coming to our house are female cooks. So ideally, if they are menstruating, तो आप ये भी सोचिए, हम सबको सोचना चाहिए कि उनके हाथ से जो बनाया हुआ खाना है, उसमें प्राण कम होने वाला है. So that is also something we need to keep in mind. Thank you, Purviji. Please continue. Yeah.
It was a wonderful session, ma'am. Got many of the old beliefs cleared. The answers to the old beliefs are very logical this time.
Yes.
Otherwise, it's like we were always following what our ancestors used to say, what our elders used to say, but we really didn't know the science behind it.
Correct. Which is why there is so much skepticism these days in accepting those. ये तो old fashioned बातें हैं, ये तो पुराने जमाने की बात है, पर उनके बीच का जो ज्ञान है वो the science हमको नहीं पता है.
Right. Thank you so much, ma'am, for inviting me for this session.
Thank you for attending on a Sunday of all days. Thank you so much.
Yeah.
Thank you, everyone. I guess that is it. Thank you for attending. We'll keep having more such sessions, and we will look forward. If you all have any more questions, if you all have any sessions that you would want us to conduct, anything else that you would want us to research and unearth and bring to you, we'll be very happy to do so. Thank you for attending, and we'll see you soon again. Goodbye.
Thank you, ma'am. Bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Thank you.